When it comes to entering Sub-Saharan Africa for a business, there's always a host of legal and compliance and regulatory issues that one has to consider to de-risk that entry as far as possible. And once business has decided it wants to take a bite of probably one of the most alluring frontier markets out there, one needs to understand exactly what one's dealing with. And one business that's been doing that for some time, well over 20 years, I believe, is Into Group, and I'm joined now by the Group CEO, Ralph Ertner. Ralph, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Can you give us some general information about your practice in Africa, your business, and what sort of clients you serve and what sort of issues you're helping them deal with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Michael. We operate what we call the EF Rica platform, which shows the opportunities in the remainder of Sub-Saharan Africa, which consists out of 49 countries in total, so leaving 48 to explore. And we are focusing from the small, medium enterprise, to larger, even stock-listed enterprises, predominantly from countries outside Africa, from Europe, from Asia, and from the Americas, in order to find a new foothold in Sub-Saharan Africa.
Now, in your recent experience, and we know that the African growth story is pretty well known here in South Africa, but how is that story translating in Europe? We see investment levels have clearly picked up to take or to harvest the growth that we see in the African continent, but commodity prices have now come off the boil. Has that impacted the knocks on your door? Are you seeing a decrease in interest in Africa as a result of the commodity story, or is there still a lot of that low growth fruit to be had?
No, there's definitely the interest has increased, significantly over the last, I would say, 2 years. First of all, it's a couple of companies, already be active in South Africa and, are having their first experience on the African continent. Also, the news and information available now, diversifies clearly, that, Sub-Saharan Africa is not a one country like South Africa, but it has got various areas. And of course, depending, and in the wake of the declining commodity prices, one must see that certain areas of Sub-Saharan Africa outperform other parts. So you can't really talk about Africa as such, but of regions.
Well, that's good to hear, certainly for the African growth story. What specific sectors and geographic regions are you seeing as offering particular interest right now?
I would say the one conditions the other. If you look at the exceptionally annual GDP growth in Eastern Africa, in countries ranging down to Tanzania and Mozambique, you see it in Zambia. We're not talking about the ill-received kwacha in the moment. But you're looking at even smaller countries like Rwanda or giant countries like Uganda, who are on the verge of starting their oil exploitation. Unfortunately, in a very low oil price. I mean, it dropped below $40 today, so which must be driving the guys there insane. Also means that infrastructure has to, grow with it in order to further growth. So the sectors which are most interesting in particular these areas, of course, is the energy sector, which is, the main sector of infrastructure. We don't have to tell, how the situation in South Africa is. Formerly proud supplier of electricity to the neighboring countries, had to terminate bilateral agreements and start, focusing on their own, load shedding riddled crisis. And now the countries are on their own. They need to supply power. We've got weird situations in countries like Malawi and Rwanda where the topographics don't allow for big central power generation and big transmission networks. So island solutions and smart grid technology is there. The road was the transport of Africa yesterday. We're looking at railways. We're looking at inner urban, new commuting systems. And also away from the infrastructure sectors and the roads and bridges, we're looking at health. The medical sector, the country that's booming, starts, revamping hospitals, upgrading, building new ones. There's a huge need for medical equipment, electronically and consumables, for fitting and know-how.
And we see a lot of that is driven, when you look at infrastructure, large infrastructure projects, even health, by government. And very often we see the model of a public-private partnership being employed. Is that the typical kind of project that you be advising your clients on?
It depends a little bit on the regime, the fiscal regime of the country. I mean, from a perspective of the country's governments in especially East Africa, of course they would like to have a PPP, prefer to everything else. But from our client's perspective, there's a little bit of a reluctance. Like with any good business partners, you say, prove yourself first. They like to, let's go for a tender first or negotiate, municipal level contracts before they're entering into a PPP, because it's a long-term commitment, especially financially.
And talk to me about the sort of setup. Very often we see a business model employed where perhaps you'll try and operate the business remotely. And very often those are the businesses that end up failing. You need boots on the ground, don't you?
Absolutely, Michael. The biggest mistake, and a lot of international companies learned it the hard way when starting in South Africa, is trying to run your business remote. You set up a company, you put somebody in who you think you can trust, and you think you can guide everything from afar. Especially in East Africa and Central Africa, you're hands-on. You need to be hands-on. You need to be there. Don't rely on a distributor or agent you find. You need to be talking to the government official. The governments are all very approachable, and they want to see you on a regular basis. Not that much playing golf like in South Africa, but I mean for the odd day out and for the meeting and the coffees, and in order to see what's happening.
And when we talk about that form of engagement, obviously there's always talk of local beneficiation in Africa. That seems to be a general policy thrust across the region. What are you witnessing in that regard?
It's very funny that you say it. I mean, I think everybody has heard enough about BEE or triple B, double E in South Africa and thinks that's a phenomenon that only occurs here. But, local content and local quota and protecting and further lowering the local unemployment have been, on the cards of a lot of governments. The Zambia has got the citizen empowerment legislation. Zimbabwe has got, the indigenization legislation. Botswana requires resident directors and company secretaries in order to conduct business. So you need to do your homework first in order to see how much do I have to, and excuse the words, do I have to go into bed with, somebody that I might not know that well. On the other hand, we have got countries, especially like Tanzania, Rwanda, etc., where, they're embracing everybody coming from the outside because, they said, listen, we managed quite well so far. We reduced unemployment. We have got no crime, but now we need roads and hospitals.
Just one last thing, Ralph, before I let you go. When one looks at some do's and don'ts, obviously it's very important to do your due diligence, but what are some golden rules to apply when looking to invest in a growth market in Sub-Saharan Africa?
I would say the first thing is what we touched on briefly earlier is, set up your own entity and make it properly. Be present, be visible, be personally visible as a company owner, travel regularly at least, if not spending a lot of time there. Secondly, respect the country because you're a guest. Expect different legislation, look at the licensing requirements, try to, comply with them. Don't, try to use shortcuts, There is red tape to be cut, but I mean, unfortunately it had to be cut, but then, success is inevitable.
Well, just ask MTN about that, and I think some very good advice there. Get your passport stamped as often as possible. Ralph, an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and I look forward to talking about some more ways to de-risk entry into Africa in the near future.
Well, pleasure to being here. Thank you, Michael.
That was Ralph Ertner, CEO of Into SA Group, with some tips on getting into Africa in this week's legal feature on Classic Business.